Billions spent, decades of work, and yet these public transport systems are still a mess. Every city promises a better future with public transport, faster commutes, cleaner air, and fewer cars. But when the ribbon-cutting ceremonies are over, reality hits. Delays, corruption, overcrowding, and endless budget holes. Here are some of the world's most notorious examples, and the reasons why so many cities keep getting it wrong. New York's subway is one of the most iconic and most frustrating public transport systems in the world. Built more than a century ago, it moves over 3 million people a day. But if you've ever waited on a platform in the summer heat while your train sits in the station due to signal problems, you already know something's broken. The New York MTA, the agency that runs the subway, has become famous for delays, construction overruns, and ballooning costs. New York spends up to 7 times more per mile of new subway construction than any other major city in the world. 7 times. How does that even happen? Well, it's not one thing, but everything. You've got a tangled mess of agencies, union rules, contractors charging premium rates, and political interference at every level. Every project becomes a negotiation between city, state, and federal officials, all pulling in different directions. There's a famous example, the 2nd Avenue subway. It was first proposed in 1929 and finally opened one tiny segment in 2017. That's 88 years later. And the price tag? Over $4.5 billion for just 2 miles of track. The MTA blames legacy systems, complex tunneling, and high safety standards. All true, but other major cities manage those too, and still do it cheaper. New York's subway also suffers from chronic maintenance delays. Some trains and signals are literally from the 1930s. Upgrading them means shutting down service, which leads to public outrage, which politicians want to avoid. So instead, the system limps along, patching the cracks with duct tape and prayer. So yes, the subway technically works, but it's a textbook example of how bureaucracy, politics, and cost inflation can quietly kill progress. Now, let's take a trip halfway across the world to Jakarta, Indonesia. If you think New York has congestion problems, Jakarta laughs in your face. This is a city where traffic jams can last 5 hours, and the average commuter spends more than 400 hours a year stuck on the road. For decades, Jakarta relied almost entirely on private vehicles and informal buses, known locally as angkot. The government tried to fix that with the Trans-Jakarta Bus Rapid Transit System in 2004, and on paper it was a great idea. Dedicated lanes, low fares, high frequency. At first it was a hit, but then reality set in. The problem wasn't the idea, it was the execution. Jakarta's BRT became a victim of its own success after it was overcrowded, underfunded, and poorly enforced. The dedicated bus lanes were constantly invaded by private cars. Maintenance lagged behind. Stations fell apart. And because of political pressure, fares stayed low while costs ballooned. This resulted in a system designed for speed, became slower than a car in rush hour. Then there's the Jakarta MRT, opened in 2019 as a shiny modern subway line meant to symbolize progress, but it only covers one corridor in a city of 10 million people. Expansion plans exist, but funding and land acquisition move at a glacial pace. So while Jakarta deserves credit for trying, it's trapped in a cycle. Rapid urban growth, political short-termism, and lack of long-term maintenance culture. And in the end, people keep buying cars and motorbikes, making the original problem worse. Los Angeles has one of the largest transit systems in the United States by area, and yet one of the lowest ridership rates. For decades, LA has poured billions into subways and light rail, trying to convince people to ditch their cars. But despite all the spending, ridership has actually declined. This is because Los Angeles was literally designed for cars. After World War II, the city ripped up its streetcar network, one of the largest in the world at the time, and replaced it with freeways. Entire neighborhoods were bulldozed to make room for highways. Today, even with a shiny new metro map, most Angelinos still find it easier and faster to drive, and part of that comes down to urban design. Public transport works best in dense cities where people live, work, and shop close to stations, but LA is famously sprawling a patchwork of suburbs stretching for miles. Even if you live near a train, the place you're going probably isn't. Then there's safety. In recent years, concerns about crime and homelessness on trains have pushed even more riders away. The city keeps expanding rail lines, but without tackling the bigger issue, the system risks becoming a very expensive ghost network. Now let's look at Mexico City, home to one of the largest metro systems in the Western Hemisphere. Opened in 1969, the Metro de la Ciudad de Mexico serves around 4.5 million passengers a day. It's cheap, extensive, and vital, but it's also falling apart. Mexico City's problem isn't lack of use, it's too much use. The system is built for a smaller city, and now it's overwhelmed. Trains are packed to bursting. platforms are dangerously full, and the infrastructure is aging fast. Then came tragedy. In May 2021, an overpass on Line 12 collapsed, killing 26 people. Investigations revealed structural flaws, poor welding, and years of neglected maintenance. That disaster became a symbol of everything wrong with how the system is run, and the riders pay the price every day. Despite these issues, the metro remains a lifeline for Mexico City's working class. But like many public transport systems in the developing world, it's stuck in a brutal cycle. Low fares, low revenue, poor maintenance, breakdowns, public anger, political turnover, repeat. So what do these cities have in common? They're all trying to solve the same problem of how to move millions of people efficiently, but they keep running into the same traps. Public transport is one of the hardest things a government can do right. It's expensive, disruptive, and slow to deliver results, which makes it easy for politicians to promise progress, and just as easy to walk away when things get messy. But not every city fails. Some cities, like Tokyo, Seoul, and Zurich, figured out how to make it work. In the next section, we'll see why those systems succeeded where others fell apart, and what lessons the rest of the world can learn from them. At this point, many public transport fails for deeper, systematic reasons that go far beyond broken signals or cracked bridges. And to really understand that, we have to zoom out, because while some cities are stuck in an endless cycle of failure, others have quietly built transport miracles. Let's take a look at the places that got it right, and what they did differently. If there's one city that defines public transport perfection, it's Tokyo. The numbers alone are massive, with over 40 million passenger trips per day across metro, suburban rail, and private lines. Trains that arrive with an average delay of less than 1 minute, and an integrated system so dense that nearly every neighborhood has a station within walking distance. So how does Tokyo pull off what New York, LA, and so many others can't? Let's start with the philosophy. Tokyo treats public transport not as a government service, but as a public utility that must work. That means real accountability. The Tokyo Metro and JR East aren't just bureaucracies, they're companies that operate under market pressure. Many of them are publicly traded, and their profits depend on reliability, customer satisfaction, and efficiency. That might sound risky, but it actually keeps them sharp. Instead of waiting for government bailouts, these companies diversify their income. They own shopping centers, office buildings, even housing developments around their stations. It's called transit-oriented development. Basically, you build communities around transport, not the other way around. This does two things. Firstly, it guarantees ridership because people live and work near stations. Secondly, it makes the system financially self-sustaining because station areas generate revenue. But efficiency isn't just about money, it's about culture and coordination. Japanese cities plan decades ahead, with national, regional, and private networks working together instead of fighting each other. Timetables sync perfectly, transfers are easy, and even the signage follows a universal logic. Most importantly, the focus is always on the passenger experience. No mayor is out there cutting ribbons for their legacy project. The system itself is the legacy. So when you step into a Tokyo train and it glides away exactly on schedule, that's not magic. That's what happens when planning, discipline, and accountability actually align. If Tokyo is the world's model of effective solution, then Seoul is the model of integration. Seoul's metro is a modern marvel, clean, fast, and ridiculously connected. It's not just trains, but buses, subways, and suburban rail, all unified under one payment system, one fare structure, and one app. You can tap a single card with the T-Money card, and easily switch between trains and buses without worrying about different fares or tickets. That might sound simple, but it's something even major Western cities haven't figured out yet. In Seoul, everything is data-driven. Real-time monitoring tracks crowd levels, route demand, and passenger flow. Algorithms adjust bus frequency dynamically, and transparent digital boards show how full each train car is. This constant optimization keeps the system running smoothly and builds trust. People use public transit in Seoul because they know what to expect: speed, reliability, and safety. Another big difference is government coordination. Seoul's transit isn't split between dozens of agencies, it's managed centrally, with consistent long-term planning. On the other hand, cities like Los Angeles or New York have a fragmented system of multiple agencies with overlapping jurisdictions, each with its own budget, board, and politics. That fragmentation causes turf wars, delays, and inconsistent priorities. Seoul avoids that entirely. And then there's the social contract, the idea that public transport is a shared public good. In Seoul, the metro is just the way you move around. CEOs, students, and workers all ride the same system. That's powerful because when everyone uses transit, everyone cares if it works. Now let's talk about a smaller, quieter success story: Zurich, Switzerland. Zurich doesn't have Tokyo's density or Seoul's scale, but what it does have is planning discipline. Since the 70s, Zurich has followed a remarkably consistent philosophy: prioritize public transport over cars and never compromise that vision for short-term politics. When other cities were building freeways, Zurich was building tram lines. When other cities chased flashy mega projects, Zurich focused on reliability and synchronization. The result? A transport network that's famously smooth and boringly punctual. Every tram, train, and bus runs on a pulse timetable, meaning they all connect at regular intervals. You can set your watch by it. Even rural towns outside Zurich have coordinated schedules that sync perfectly with the city network. This is the opposite of how many failed systems operate, where different lines are planned in isolation, often years apart, with no integration. Zurich's approach shows that success isn't always about money. It's about consistency and sticking to a plan for decades, even when governments change. So if the blueprints for success are already out there, why do so many cities still mess up? In many cases, public transport projects take years, sometimes decades, to finish. But politicians work on 4-year election cycles. That creates a fatal mismatch. Instead of investing in boring but essential maintenance, leaders chase shiny new projects that they can cut a ribbon on. This ends up with old systems decaying, while half-finished new ones drain the budget. New York's 2nd Avenue subway is the classic example. One expensive project eating up funds that could have modernized the whole network. Jakarta, New Mexico, and Los Angeles face the same issue of constant resets with every new administration. Many cities announce big budgets, but only a fraction of that money actually goes to construction or operations. Consulting fees, political lobbying, land disputes, and endless feasibility studies eat up years and millions. Meanwhile, maintenance is seen as an expense, not an investment. The irony? A well-maintained 50-year-old system can outperform a shiny new one that's neglected. Moreover, public transport doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of the city's DNA. In cities like Los Angeles or Houston, decades of car-centric planning make it almost impossible for transit to thrive. If people live far from stations, if sidewalks are dangerous or non-existent, if jobs are spread across vast areas, no amount of rail investment will fix that. The infrastructure must match the lifestyle patterns of the people it serves. That's why Tokyo works. In some cities, public transport carries a social stigma. It's seen as something for people who can't afford cars, and not something everyone should use. That perception kills political will. If the middle and upper classes don't ride the train, they don't care how it performs. Cities like Seoul and Zurich avoid this because transit is universal and not necessarily a class marker. Lastly, many failing systems simply don't plan as systems. They build individual projects without integrating them into a larger network. That's why you see metro lines that don't connect properly, bus routes that overlap inefficiently, or ticket systems that don't talk to each other. Each part might look fine on paper, but the whole network doesn't work. But here's the part people often forget. Behind every failing transport system, there are real people. The single mother waiting for a bus that never comes, the worker that was late again because the train broke down, and the student who risks safety just to get home. These aren't just statistics, they're the daily realities of millions. And that's why fixing transit isn't just about engineering or budgets. Efficient, reliable transport gives people back their time, their safety, their opportunity. When governments get it wrong, they're not just wasting money, they're stealing hours, days, and even years from their citizens' lives. So where do we go from here? Technology might help, but only if it serves real needs. Autonomous buses, smart ticketing, on-demand shuttles, these are great tools, but without proper planning, they become gimmicks. The real breakthroughs won't come from new gadgets, they'll come from old-fashioned governance of planning ahead, maintaining infrastructure, and putting public good over politics. And that's starting to happen in a few places. Cities like Paris are expanding bike lanes and redesigning streets for people, not cars. Singapore is integrating autonomous buses with human drivers for hybrid systems. Even New York is finally modernizing its ancient signals, slowly but surely. Change is possible, but it requires patience, consistency, and humility.